Welcome to Maccabee Sharper Angle Digital event. My name is Christine Scherping. I'm a Vice President at Maccabee Public Relations, and today we are going to be talking about all things influencer marketing. When most brands think about social influencers, many times the first image that comes to mind is a beautiful, polished, stylized post on Instagram, which can be true. But influencer marketing can be so much more than that. In this morning's event, we are so excited to share with you insights from our experts today on influencer trends for 2020, 2021, how to successfully incorporate influencers in both your B2B and B2C marketing campaigns, and creative ways to work with influencers regardless of your industry. A note that we will be recording today's session and a link will be shared in a follow-up email. And a quick housekeeping note, please mute yourselves. And if you have any questions, please submit them into the chat box and we'll make sure to address. We'll save the first 20-25 minutes for a discussion and then the last 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A, and we will wrap up by 8:45. So with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. They'll each give a brief overview of their background. And we'll start with Allison O'Keefe, who is the Influencer Marketing Manager at Best Buy.
Hi everyone. Yes, as Christine mentioned, I work at Best Buy. I am on our influencer marketing team who handles all of our influencer partnerships, really from start to finish. So ideation, strategic planning, through execution and all the details that go into launching influencer partnerships through reporting and analysis. I really serve as the channel expert internally between our various marketing teams who are overseeing all the different channels and vehicles, and influencer marketing is just one of those, and the conduit to our external influencer agency partners who really help us strategically guide us to what's happening in the industry, but then also serve as our activation arm. I also integrate with our paid media partners as we have paid media promotion incorporated with many of our influencer activations. So that is also kind of my role to integrate. At Best Buy, we have like a lot of different product categories and it's always changing given the nature of retail. So we work with a really broad set of influencer partners, but we mostly hone in on lifestyle and tech partners. Although we tap into health and wellness, food and travel and photography influencers as our business needs arise. And I have been at Best Buy in this role for the last 3 years.
Well, thank you, Allison. We'll continue to Emily Richter, who is the COO at Foodie Finds.
Good morning, everyone. I am Emily, and as Christine mentioned, I'm the COO at Foodie Finds, where I oversee brand collaborations and influencer partnerships. I also do business operations there, and as a small team of 3, you can also find me testing recipes, writing content, creating stuff on social, and everything in between. I have been at Foodie full-time for about 3 years, part-time for about 5 years, and in my previous life, I was on the agency side doing influencer partnerships over there and strategy. So I come with kind of a unique background of being on the agency side and now on the quote-unquote influencer side, and I'm excited to chat with you guys today.
Thank you so much, Emily, and we will round up the intros with Bruno, who is the founder of InfluenceKit.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Bruno Bornsztein, and I just normally I would apologize for the kids and the dog running around in the background, but I feel like the age of apologizing for that has ended. So because I'm sure everybody has the same. So those are my kids and my dog. I run InfluenceKit, which is a software tool that helps influencers and brands build stronger relationships by having better reporting on sponsored content and influencer marketing. My background is that prior to this, I ran some content sites. One of them is called Kerley.com, which is a home DIY design site. And so I have a lot of experience from the influencer side in terms of actually running influencer campaigns. And through InfluenceKit have sort of had the opportunity to work with both brands and influencers and see more of both sides of that. So I'm excited to talk about some of those things.
Wonderful. Well, we'll go ahead and get started with some of the questions. You each have very unique backgrounds in the influencer marketing world. Would love to hear about your start in influencer and brand partnerships and your thoughts on how it's evolved since you've started. Emily, we'll start with you.
Perfect. Yeah, my start in influencer is kind of interesting. Lee Hirsch, now Funky, the founder of Fit Foodie Finds, actually hired me about 5 years ago when brand collaborations became a bigger thing for Fit Foodie Finds. It still is the wild, wild west of kind of marketing and advertising, but as it became a bigger piece of business at Fit Foodie Finds, she really needed someone to help kind of manage those conversations, do contract negotiations, make sure that collaborations would be a good fit for the brand, and kind of everything in between. And that started as a small part-time job and is now my full-time position. So as the last few years have evolved and as influencer has become more strategic and a bigger part of lots of businesses' marketing spend, it's become a larger part of our business as well. So that was kind of my start from the influencer side. And then from the agency side, I was in strategy, and eventually that included influencer. Nobody knew where to put it. Nobody knew exactly how to find the right place to put this and how it integrated into a larger campaign. So that fortunately for the brands that I worked on was included in the strategy and in the upfront. And I think there's a lot of influencer work even to this day that gets bundled in with execution. And we can talk more about that later in this conversation. But I think when it's involved in the upfront strategy is when we find the most success from the influencer side and from the brand side.
Wonderful. And Bruno, you have a unique background, just knowing that you started with creating content, but then you also realized there was an opportunity to talk about creating those stronger relationships between brands and partners or influencer partners from an ROI perspective. Can you speak a little bit more about your start there and how you see this evolving in the future?
Yeah, so on Kerley, the blog that I run, I think we did our first sponsored post in like 2009. So a long time ago when it didn't really even have a name. And just so we learned a lot, you know, and that progressed from being like 0% of our revenue then to over 50% of our revenue by, 2017. So it was a huge growth. And we really had to deal with those growing pains in terms of volume of content that we were having to produce for brands, managing all those relationships. And we really realized that the best experiences were, like Emily said, when we were involved in the process early on, and when we had a long kind of continuing relationship with these brands. So Sherwin-Williams is one that we did a lot of work with. I mean, we had a relationship with them spanning years. So they really knew us. We knew their brand messaging. We knew their products. We knew what their planning cycle was like. So those collaborations worked really well. And we quickly found that the collaborations where somebody would come to us, a week before they wanted something and give us, very short turnaround and very strict instructions on what the content, had to look like, just didn't really work well and didn't resonate with our readers and ultimately didn't provide a lot of value to the brand. So fortunately, I think both content creators and brands have become more educated in the last 2 or 3 years. And you're seeing more of those collaborations that are really productive on both sides.
Wonderful. And Allison, you've been on the agency side, transitioned to the corporate side. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've seen the influencer marketing world shift over those years?
Yes, I've worked in some capacity with influencers back when they were called bloggers, when I was fresh out of school, and they kind of gave it to me as the intern to say, we're not quite sure how to work or with these people, so help define it, help find the people that we need to work with. And I quickly learned it was very different than any other channel, and the ways that you approach partnership and the expectations for how you collaborate on content is very, very different than traditional journalists or even traditional advertising channels. But I was super drawn to it and love the ability to work with digital influencers who are so good at creating content and blending your brand with their own unique point of view and personality that is so sought after and trusted by their followers. And so in each role I've had on the agency side, I was building first ever influencer programs for our clients like Land O'Lakes, General Mills, and Explore Minnesota Tourism. But then as I transitioned to corporate at Cambria and Best Buy, it's also kind of always been a part of my job to figure out, okay, there's all these influencers. We know it's important. We know we want to invest. We know it's a growing channel, but it feels very ad hoc. And so how do we streamline everything into a really cohesive strategic plan so everyone has confidence with who we're partnering with, the why behind we're partnering with those people, and how we can continue to really move forward in a strategic way, like Emily mentioned. I think in all organizations that I've worked with, there's a little bit of question mark around influencer marketing because it's been so ad hoc in the past. And so many different teams have maybe had a portion of the influencer marketing strategy. And so really centralizing that and ensuring that it's getting as much support and strategic marketing rigor internally before we actually start the partnerships and start executing. So I've definitely seen it move from being a value add channel that we're just trying to throw on as a lucky strike extra to a campaign is really the center of a lot of campaign strategy and the center of how we're going to activate in the digital space.
Wonderful. And speaking of those things that you've learned over the years and how Best Buy structures their influencer marketing programs internally, can you tell us a little bit more about how Best Buy uses influencers? It sounds like you work across a lot of different categories. And from a brand perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges or misconceptions that people have in terms of working with influencers or brand partnerships?
Yeah, so I would say that each organization has a unique structure, and Best Buy is an enormous enterprise, and we serve a lot of different marketing teams, which is really comprised of our vendor marketing programs with vendors who sell products at our store and want to co-market with Best Buy. And then we also support our brand-led initiatives that are Best Buy-centric campaigns like holiday or student initiatives throughout the year. And our team really serves as that channel, deep channel expert, similar to, you know, a media team, but we are deep within the influencer space and can help guide the business teams in what is their business KPI, what are they trying to achieve, and then coming back to help build out the recommendation for how we activate influencers based on their needs. Most of our campaigns do tend to focus on content creation with influencers who have pretty substantial reach, just because we are looking for that national footprint with many of our campaigns. But when we have bigger campaigns and bigger budgets, that's where we'll start to do multi-tiered programs with a wider variety of partners across all tiers, micro up to celeb, and activate them in different ways and start leveraging their content as well across our ecosystem for both paid and owned. I think for misconceptions that I've seen, and this isn't specific to Best Buy, I think there's still a misconception that it feels really new, so it should be cheap and turnkey compared to the other marketing channels. And I think we're really just reaching a point of maturation, and it's very, very complex when working with influencers, especially at that mid to high tier level, and the amount of planning that has to go in place with their teams and the rigor that happens within contracting and negotiation to ensure all parties are aligned on the upfront is something that I think we continue to need to level set. So we set up, we have an execution phase of our campaign, which is around 10 weeks, that we can really get contracts started and then content created. But then the strategic planning process is about double that, when we're actually looking to collaborate or build a program that's specific to an influencer or a much larger influencer-centric program and something that we do. We just need a lot more lead time to work through that so we don't crunch the execution phase.
Fantastic. And one of the things that when we were doing our little test run yesterday, we were talking about how far in advance companies plan for influencer brand partnerships. Can you tell us a little bit what you're working or how far out you're planning right now for influencer partnerships that are part of a larger campaign?
Yes, so I mean, at retailers, Best Buy isn't unique either, but we are always planning for seasons ahead. So annual planning is happening, 9 months ahead of when we would be in market. And then really further planning is happening 6 months out, where we're thinking really high level about all the different elements of the campaign and working with our partners to come up with that high level strategy. I think it's hard when we get like inbound influencer requests, like, hey, I have this like great thing and Best Buy would be a good fit for a TV I need installed next week. It's really hard for our organization to be able to execute on something like that, just given the size of our organization and that most of our budgets and most of our marketing plans are further baked, at that 6 to 9 month mark. And then we move into execution closer to 3 months out.
Fantastic. A quick reminder for everyone that if any of you have any questions, please submit them into the chat box and we'll make sure to address toward the end of today's program. So we've heard quite a bit the word unprecedented for the year 2020. Would love to hear your thoughts on how it's affected your business or brand partnerships, and any trends that you are noticing during our current environment. So with that said, Bruno, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so InfluenceKit, like I said, we work with influencers, bloggers, and also with brands. So we definitely saw a pretty significant drop in March and April as brands kind of hit the pause button on a lot of partnerships, and as content creators just weren't really sure what was happening. So there was definitely a dip there. We've seen it really come back to March levels, which is kind of amazing. I think it has shifted definitely a lot in terms of the kinds of content partnerships that are happening right now. So a lot of them are around the home, some food stuff. So in terms of the types of things that are getting executed, I think that's shifted. But I think people have realized that that the marketing still has to go on, that people are spending online more than ever. I don't have the stats handy, but I think e-commerce spending has just exploded in the last 6 months, obviously. So I think brands realize that they still need to find a way to get their message out there, and that influencer marketing is just as effective, if not more effective now as it was a year ago. So what you are definitely seeing is more brands wanting to have, like Allison said, more rigor around the process. So that I think I see that in terms of a longer planning period with more involvement and more communication with influencers up front. And then also reporting. And, thankfully that's what we try to do at InfluenceKit. But just the ability to prove ROI on these campaigns. I think another, to your previous question, another myth about influencer marketing is like, it's a black box, you can't measure it. I don't think that's true. I mean, I think it definitely poses some challenges. I think it depends on what you're trying to measure. Sometimes people go into influencer marketing trying to measure the wrong thing. So they go into it trying to measure how many treadmills they sold. That's affiliate marketing, right? That's you're trying to drive an action. Influencer marketing is about brand building. It's about storytelling. So you can't necessarily measure how many treadmills my blog post sold for you. So you need to look at other metrics, and we are seeing brands do more and more of that and try to quantify the value of these campaigns.
Fantastic. And Emily from Foodie Finds, could you tell us a little bit more of like how you're seeing 2020 impact your business and some trends that may be a little bit different than what you would have expected given the current environment that we're in?
Yeah, this has been an interesting year for everyone, but as kind of a healthy food site, we create healthy recipes that are accessible with simple ingredients. And so as people were transitioning to stay-at-home orders and cooking more at home, this was a huge opportunity for us. We saw a huge spike in traffic right away in March. Our traffic was up 50% year over year, which is unanticipated in those times for us. So traffic was way up, but advertising was way down. So from a business perspective, it impacted us in that way. But the more interesting side of things was the human behavior behind all of it. traditionally, as we go into March, April, May, we would see healthy salads start to trend, healthy grilling recipes, traditional summer recipes that people are cooking with larger groups in the summer, and that just wasn't the case this year. We had pot roasts and crock pot recipes and like true comfort food casseroles trending this summer, as well as cocktails. And it's interesting to see the human behavior behind all of this and see people cooking at home, but very differently than this season would have them cooking in any other time. So we really feel like people wanted to be comforted and wanted to feel like they were eating wholesome meals during this time. And then they also kind of wanted to be a little drunk. We had saw cocktail recipes spiking during times of year that we otherwise wouldn't. And usually those times are holiday. We've got Thanksgiving, Christmas, holiday parties where, yes, our cocktails are very popular, but summer is not typically that time. So it's interesting to see the human behavior behind all of this and how we've been able to shift as a business. So we've continued to create traditional summer recipes, grilling, salads, pasta salads, potato salads, things like that. But how we've supported on social has changed this summer. So we've had to pivot and really support that content that people are looking for. I mean, and we're pretty far north in terms of eating hot foods, and our chicken noodle soup is the most popular recipe on our site, right? It's interesting times, so it's figuring out ways to support that content, and if that truly is the content that people are looking for, making sure they can find it easily on our site and they can see it on social and know that these recipes are accessible to them, as lots of people still are at home and will be for the foreseeable future. So from our business perspective, that's how it's affected us. And then from a brand collaboration standpoint, especially being in Minneapolis, during kind of the social unrest that we're in right now, I think brands, the brands that we've worked with have been very receptive, and that has been really awesome. We stopped all sponsored content for from end of May until about mid-July, and brands were very receptive to that. We didn't have any brand push back and say like, no, this sponsored Blender post has to go live while there's protests happening in Minneapolis. And I think we were fortunate to have that relationship with brands where we were able to have honest conversations about what made sense on our channels and what we felt comfortable sharing. But yeah, from a social unrest standpoint, that was great to see. And I think we were fortunate in that regard. And then from kind of a pandemic standpoint, things have been changing, and we've been seeing a lot of brands coming at us because they're pivoting as well. So we've been seeing a lot of brands coming with really last minute campaigns with different messaging that they're looking for. We've had some brand collaborations that were planned a year in advance, and that's great. But brands have been able to pivot and say like, hey, no, like we can't position this as a backyard barbecue with a large group of people. Like that's just not the right message for anyone right now. So how can we make this kind of a small, intimate family barbecue in the backyard? Things like that. So it's been an interesting year, and I think there's been pivoting on everyone's side to be able to find that success.
Those are all great points. And just knowing some of the things that have happened in 2020, you've touched on several of them. When you're thinking about planning for the rest of 2020 or even looking into 2021, what trends or changes do you anticipate that may be coming just based on conversations that you're having? And we'll start from a brand perspective first. So Allison, if you don't mind taking this one.
Yeah, I think Emily and Bruno did a good job of setting up kind of the key trends that are impacting our partnerships right now. Is how is the content coming across, and how do we ensure that we're aligned with the right partners on both sides so that we can trust in them to deliver a message that has the right tone given whatever is going to happen in the environment through the election and through, knock on wood, the end of COVID next year. And so there's a lot more vetting and strategic thought on who all of our partners are. But I think as a whole, as the industry has been maturing, there's just this push for quality over quantity and finding your people. So we use the analogy of like brands and influencers have been dating a lot, but it's really about getting serious with a few core partners that love your brand and know your brand and get it, for lack of a better term, to just have more consistent partnerships. And that will also allow on both sides just greater efficiencies and being able to create more content at scale and have the content that we're creating together hit the mark and feel more authentic. So that's not a new thing, but I think that's a thing that all of the unrest and all of the unknowns that have happened this year just make it more important as we move forward. I also think, given the production limitations on the other side of the house, the traditional creative, there's more and more appetite to lean into influencers as our remote content partners and content producers, as that's just the way that they do their business anyway. So it's kind of forcing companies to determine how to be more nimble, more turnkey, and look at some external partners as it relates to content production that they maybe have been able to control more in-house. And then the last thing I would say, just as a trend, is like TikTok is of course the new frontier, the new shiny object that has been a star of quarantine. And so I know brands are already leaning in and just figuring out how your influencer strategy lines up with your organic brand strategy on TikTok, and the nuances of that platform and how sponsored content can work or cannot work is something that I think marketers will continue to have to tackle for the next 6 to 12 months.
All great points. Also love the dating analogy.
Want to go steady.
No, it's a great point. And then you can have those deeper conversations if you need to. You know, we had talked at the beginning about a lot of times most people think influencers just create content, which you all do in a really great and compelling way. But what are some creative ways that brands can work with influencers beyond the content creation and social amplification? Emily would love to hear some of the things that Foodie Finds has done, just given that you've done so many different unique things over the year.
Yeah, happy to. And Allison makes a good point. The dating analogy is so true. We would rather be in like a few very long-term relationships than like dating a bunch of people and have campaigns that don't perform for anyone. So that makes a ton of sense. I'd say from our perspective, we're open. Like if brands have out of the box ideas that are not a traditional blog post with a recipe creation or an Instagram post, like we're open to those ideas. And I think the most successful brand partnerships that we've had have utilized multiple channels, and that sometimes can even come offline and include, and these are different times in 2020, but include an in-person event or a cooking class or some sort of learning opportunity where we can kind of combine that online reach with an in-person kind of high touch event or environment. And that's been hugely successful for us and for the brands as well. So I think the most successful campaigns are ones where we can think a little bit outside the box, and it's a little less executional, create this, publish this, tell us how it performed, see you later. Where it can be a longer term collaboration where we can kind of decide together what are the best deliverables to help you achieve your goal. That's where we've seen the most success for sure.
Wonderful.
I'll just chime in. I think that's a great point, and I think virtual events. You know, I haven't seen this happening yet, so I can't say that, but I would love to. I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't make sense for a brand to hold a virtual event, a webinar. You do see a lot of people doing obviously Instagram stories, but Instagram Live is something that you're seeing people do a lot more. The thing it just makes me think about, or Emily's comments make me think about, is look for where you can get the most value in the partnership. And if all you're doing is just like, well, influencer marketing means I pay somebody and they put a post on Instagram, or I pay somebody and they put a post on TikTok, is that really driving much value for your brand? Is it really resonating with their audience? Because you gotta, that's why you have to be building that relationship with the influencer, because they'll know. If you come to my blog, Kerley, and you ask me that, do something for you on Instagram, like we're not strong on Instagram. That's not where our audience, meets us. So it's not going to be, we can't provide much value there. So if you build that relationship with the influencer where you're working with them and asking them, hey, where can you help us get the most value and drive the message, rather than going to them and saying, okay, do an Instagram post. That's where you'll discover those ideas. And maybe they'll come back and say, we want to try a giveaway. We want to try a webinar, or we want to do an in-person event or something like that. So I just think starting from the idea of like, okay, where can the influencer actually build the value, and then working with them to build a campaign around that.
Great point about working directly with each other and seeing what would perform best, because you obviously know what would on your channels. And Allison, from a brand perspective, are there different things, out of the box ideas that your team likes to think about when doing brand partnerships?
Yeah, we either go really deep in channel insights and making sure that we're not just syndicating content across, like, get a picture and we're going to put it across all the influencers' channels, but being really intentional and customized towards their native publishing style and where their content resonates. I do think that there's more of a shift to going deep in a channel for a specific campaign, just to have more of a cohesive presence. And I also think that the channel diversification and the types of content, even on Instagram with Reels, IGTV, in-feed and stories, gives us a lot of flexibility to figure out how we use all those different pieces of short form content to have different touch points for their followers and tell different parts of the story that we're looking to bring to life. At Best Buy, we've done 2 of our recent student campaigns that used influencers as talent. So really based on the insight that for Gen Z audiences, digital influencers are the new celebrity. Like, they would rather see their favorite YouTube star or someone they follow on Instagram in the content than an actor and actress from Hollywood. For the past 2 years, all of our back to school or computing campaigns featured influencers in long form and short form videos that we had across our entire ecosystem and also their channels. So it was really influencer centric. But what our creative team did was really hone in on each story that influencer was telling through, of course, our brief, bringing our brief to life was super customized to them. So if you're a follower of that one influencer, you could see them talking about this in their daily life. And the concept was a day in the life of ZHC. This year, we evolved it to be a little bit more focused on content creation so that the people that we're partnering with could further bring to life the laptop capabilities. So one of our vendors, Lenovo, really wanted to focus on the sound bar and that sound functionality within this laptop. So the influencer we partnered was a TikTok and Instagram star, Lauren Gray, who's also a musician. So all the content that we had with her really leaned into that music piece. If I can, I'm going to share 2 other inspiring campaigns that I just saw recently and are top of mind that I think take this idea of going deep with influencer partners to create content that feels really native to them. And so if you come across it and you're kind of familiar with them, you're like, yep, I can see this person actually using this product in real life. One is Sabra Dip just did a back to school campaign with Tabitha Brown, who is really well known for her recipes on TikTok. And they just leaned entirely into that type of style and had content that felt really raw and native and what she would typically be creating. So I thought that was really well done campaign. And then Chipotle has done their Chipotle Sponsor Us campaign on TikTok. And they had an April flight, and now they just have a September iteration of it. And it's really encouraging two-way communication and encouraging people to take their brand and create videos on TikTok that are rated and reviewed by TikTok influencer that they've partnered with. So even further giving your brand away through partnering with influencers and letting to see what the influencers and the consumers come up with as far as content, and the brand really becomes in the background.
Oh, I absolutely love, those are great examples. We talked a bit about ROI and how to demonstrate the power of influencer marketing. And Bruno, obviously you've seen this firsthand, just given that you created InfluenceKit. Can you tell us a little bit about the best ways when influencers and brands are partnering together, ways to measure success?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to do is to do it. I mean, you would not believe how many brands and influencers I still talk to who don't even do that step, you know? So to just start out with the assumption that like, we are going to measure this, we're going to try. And then after that, you know, deciding like, what are the metrics that you care about? Is it impressions? Is it engagements? Is it shares? Or is it some other metric? The broadest ones are probably things like impressions and engagements, and they're sort of like a thumbnail of everything else. You know, they don't, it's a very kind of high level view. But having the ability to do that transparently and also to do it recurringly, I don't think that's a word. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll just measure once. You know, they'll like do the campaign, and then a month later, they'll look at the stats, and then that's all they do. And unfortunately, that, you know, that really doesn't capture the full scope of the value that was created. As bloggers, you know, Emily knows this. Anybody who's created content knows, you know, your post that you created or your social media post that you created may not drive all of its value in the first 2 weeks or a month. So you have to be able to go back and look at this stuff again. I even think you should be able to look back 6 months, a year, 2 years in the past, because there may be some sponsored content that you created a year and a half ago that now is ranking #1 on Google for some keyword. And both the influencer and the brand need to know that. So I just think being able to measure repeatedly is important. Having a shared understanding with the influencer about what it is that you're measuring and what the expectations are is really important. A lot of influencers don't know what you want. I mean, they just don't know what success looks like to the brand. And that makes them really uncomfortable. They don't really know if you're happy with what they've done. You know, I talk to influencers and I say, well, like, you did this campaign, was the brand happy? And they don't even know. So following up with your influencers and giving them some feedback so that they know, yeah, that worked, we were happy, or no, that didn't really hit what we wanted, is super important, because it helps them understand what they, you know, how they can create value for you. You know, InfluenceKit specifically tries to automate some of these things. So our kind of soapbox is that influencers and brands need to have stronger relationships. Like Allison said, they need to be married. I don't know if quite married, but they need to have ongoing relationships. They need to be committed. Yeah. Just because of a lot of things Emily said, you know, suddenly there's a pandemic, suddenly there's, you know, a social justice, you know, event, or, you know, other things that come up. You need to be able to trust in your relationships with these influencers, and they need to understand your brand so that they can present it in a way that makes sense for you, and also so that they can add value to the campaign rather than just executing, right? Like, if you just wanted somebody to go out and take pretty pictures of your product, you don't need an influencer to do that. You know, hire a photographer. What you want the influencer for is so that they can add their own voice into the mix. You know, they're you know, additional to the messaging about the brand. So, you know, InfluenceKit, we're really trying to build a tool that allows brands and influencers to strengthen those relationships as much as possible. So I definitely recommend, if you're doing influencer content or if you're new to it, find a way of building those relationships. Find your people and really nurture those so that you have a team of influencers who really feel like they add to your team.
Those are all really, really good points. And I feel like the conversation has evolved from an ROI perspective, but the point of making sure to start a campaign and working together closely with your partner on what success looks like is a key factor to making that happen. So that's a really great point. We received a question about, from a brand perspective, if you're just starting out in the influencer marketing world, in your experience, what are some of the obstacles that you encountered that you wish you would have known when you started? So with that, Emily, if you want to start first.
Yeah, happy to. I think, yeah, this is interesting. I think Bruno makes good points even related to this, that we're all only as good as the information that we have. And we can't measure success if we don't know what success looks like. And that's from the brand side and the influencer side. So I think it's an interesting place to be, and everyone's learning. Like there are still very few brands, big and small, that know where to put influencer and know how it fits best into their media mix. And I think what I wish I would have known, and what I guess I wish other brands would know is to ask questions and come to the table with all the information that you need to know, and know that it's okay to get that information before you commit to anything. To Allison's point, like, this should be a serious relationship and you should be able to ask tough questions, and that can lead to better success for everyone. So I think the more information you can get before production starts happening or before deliverables are discussed, the better success you're going to see from both the brand side and the influencer side. I think even to this day, there are a lot of brands that want to work in the influencer space and just check it off and just check the box. And they already have, like, everything's baked in. They want to add influencer. They send over a brief. They tell you the deadline, and then they want it just done. And I think the influencers that are doing well with this are the ones that are asking the tough questions, the ones that are saying no to campaigns that aren't necessarily a good fit, and the ones who know when things are going to perform and when they're not. We at Fit Foodie Finds, we never have more than 5% sponsored content in any given month. And we've all seen the influencers on every platform where, like, you're scrolling through and every post is hashtag ad. And from a due diligence standpoint on the brand side, like, those aren't going to be great influencer collaborations if there's a lot of sponsored content and you are just one of this ginormous sea of sponsored content. But from an influencer side, like, what is your brand message, and what are you saying as a brand that you stand for if you are collaborating with everyone and their mom? So I think being choosy and making sure that it is an actual good fit for you and a good fit for the brand is also important.
Fantastic. And we're going to wrap up here in just a couple of minutes, but Allison, would love to hear your perspective from a brand. From brand side, some of the challenges that you wish you would have known, or things that you're still encountering, but you're getting closer and finding a solution.
Oh, where to begin? Some things have changed so much since I've started working, and then some things we're still having the same conversations. I think if you're just getting started, this important thing is to, like, get your ducks in a row, and you have a lot in your internal marketing teams, like your target audience, information about who those people are, and your influencers should really help support reaching your target audience. And so I think we get a lot of, like, oh, but this person has a following, and, like, this person really loves our brand. But if you get really tight on matching your influencer marketing efforts to the type of, media targeting you're doing and the type of data that you already know about your core customers, your influencer marketing campaign should also be focused on that core. And really define that and do that rigor and get everybody bought in on it, because you'll just be so much more confident as a team saying yes or no, or being able to justify the partners that you end up working with. The other thing I would say with all of the programs I've ever worked on is being realistic with a crawl, walk, run. So, like, a phased approach, the first 6 months to a year, like, start with a few partners, really test and learn, and then scale from there. And, like, maybe you do start out with, pretty basic sponsored posts and with a really core small group. And then as you get more confident, you can continue to expand and innovate within the space. I think that will just set your team up for success, and you can ensure that everybody's aligned on the goals and you're measuring it appropriately, and hopefully the process will go so much more smooth if you do the due diligence of planning up front.
All great points. I feel like we could probably talk for at least another hour. This topic will continue to evolve, so maybe we'll all get together again in the future to continue this conversation. But with that, a huge thank you to Allison, Emily, and Bruno for the discussion this morning and for sharing all of your insights based on your experience. Thanks to everyone who is listening. A reminder that we will be sending out this link and we will be developing a blog post with a little bit more of the insights that we'll be sharing with you as well. Our next Sharper Angle series event will be next October 13th specifically. More information will be coming to you about what the topic will be. But once again, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And once again, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.